Hello! This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Correllian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don, and as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments onto most any platform you happen to be watching on if you're watching live, and they will show up here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. And yesterday, we interviewed author and high priestess Sarah Hartsong from Tola Sanctuary. And I thought that was a lovely interview. I hope that you enjoyed it. And she will probably join us again one day in the future. Uh, the day before that, we were talking about the energy centers of the Earth, vortices, ley lines, the Earth's meridians. And today we're going to talk about the energy centers of the body, the chakras, and the meridians that link them. And in talking about this, and hello to Nikki in the chat room, it's good to see you, Nikki. I'm going to start by talking about our modern understanding of the chakras as I'm familiar with it from my own background. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you. Um, and then maybe a little bit about the history of the chakras, a little bit about what we do with chakras. We'll see where the half hour leads us. And hello to Bimby in the chat room. So just as the earth has energy centers, so too does the body. And the earth has many vortices. Some of them are very large, some of them are very small. Um, Many of them are natural, some of them are not. And the chakra system is pretty much the same. There are very large chakras that we work with a great deal. There are very small chakras that we rarely think about. And there are such things as artificial chakras and chakra enhancements as well. Very much the same as working with the vortices of the earth in that sense. And just as with the vortices of the earth, we can put um, chakras to use in many ways other than just running our bodies and our physical existence. And hello to Christine in the chat room, and hello to Mystique in the chat room. We can put energy into them, which we often do in healing, sometimes in magic. We can pull energy from them, which we also do uh, in um, healing and magic in many different ways. We project energy through them. We do a lot of things with chakras. In my understanding, there are thousands, if not millions, of chakras in the human body. And hello to Raven in the chat room. And those minor chakras are all over the place. And if you want to study the minor chakras, I would recommend studying something like acupuncture, um, which, although it doesn't use that same term, has mapped out many of these small energy centers in great detail and has certainly proven its effectiveness over the years. Um, in the background I come from, we would call these minor chakras. There are generally agreed to be in modern working 7 major chakras. Although there are some people who use a few more, some people, particularly historically, who interact with a few less major chakras. But 7 is the predominant number that people will talk about. And those are the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, the heart chakra, the throat chakra, the third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. And each of these has its own particular purpose that it does naturally, and also can be called upon in in our magical and metaphysical workings. For example, the sacral chakra is very closely associated with creativity, with self-expression. The solar plexus chakra has a lot to do with relationships and how we interact with others. The heart chakra has a lot to do with emotion. Um, the crown chakra has to do with connection to spirit. The third eye uh, with um, with psychic abilities. The throat chakra with communication. The root chakra with vitality and the life force itself. And all of these different chakras, we work with it in many different ways. Um, or at least in my background, we work with them in many different ways because developing them is very important to our spiritual development. Now, having said that, I'm also a great believer in the binder chakra system, which talks about the different aspects of these major chakras, that it's not as simple as a single energy point, but each of them is composed of many smaller aspects, which can be developed at different levels. And in the binder system, there's usually a right side and a left side, a right companion and a left companion, and seven different levels within the chakra, all of which are slightly different in their focus and will be slightly different in their development in different people, depending on how they've developed them. Therefore, when you work with different people, although the charts will tell you a chakra may be located in a particular place, you may not find that's where the major energy focus will be in a given person because they may have developed it differently. And this is very much like the physical body as well. If you look at medical charts of the physical body, you will see very detailed renderings of where every little vein is in the body and where every organ is located. But any physician should be able to tell you that that isn't necessarily what you find when you go physically looking at a body. They're all individual, and things may be aligned a little differently. And energy is the same way. Our energetic bodies also don't necessarily correspond exactly to where we expect things to be. And my understanding of this is that this has to do with how we've developed them, and that, in fact, that development is constantly going forward, constantly changing. Um, so, for example, if we look at our heart chakra, exactly how we're going to feel that energy is going to be in part based on our emotional experiences in this and other lifetimes and what parts of that chakra have become most developed. And part of our karmic lessons are going to be wrapped around developing the parts we haven't developed yet, because ultimately we must develop them all. This makes working with chakras a fairly complicated process if you want to go that deeply into it. Few people actually do. Um, Most people are content to work with the seven major chakras. And for most people's purposes, um, that's really all that you need. One of the things that's very important is keeping your chakras clear, um, unblocked, balanced. And if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you'll know that I have several times done chakra balancings in the form of meditation here on Midday with Reverend Don because I think it's very important. I tend to do it around the time of the equinoxes. Um, but in daily practice, you don't want to wait for an equinox. You want to do it when you feel the need for it. And we talk about all of this extensively in the Correllian degree lessons, which have a lot to do with developing the chakras and developing energy, the energetic body, and the use of energy in general. And in my mind, this is vitally important to everything magical, um, because this is the energy system we're drawing upon to do these things. And as with the vortices of the earth, the more you study them, the more complexities there are, the more there is to learn. That's true for our chakras as well. It's true really for almost anything that you want to learn and develop. Um, but if you really want to learn about it, it's well worth going into the deep waters and learning more. In our Correllian degree lesson, um, chapter 2.9 deals with the minor chakras and the binder system of chakras that I was speaking of, and most people hate that chapter. I've had people say that they cried over that chapter. But the energy workers, the people who specialize in energy, often love that chapter above all others because it goes into minute detail of where certain things are. And I've spoken about the binder system before. When I first heard it, I thought something to the effect of, you've been smoking something very interesting here. Um, but as he continued to explain, I recognized things that I had experienced um, and not understood them in a chakric sense previously. Um, One of the things he talks about is how, in particular, the back teeth have a connection to the upper part of the throat chakra and the lower part of the third eye chakra, and how when you have things happening there, they have a meaning in that context. And as it happens, I'd been experiencing that and recognized the context just before he was talking about it. He talked about the chakras in the eyes and things that you might experience with that. I recognized having experienced that as well. And in fact, recognized it as a not uncommon thing that you read about in certain metaphysical circles, but I'd never heard it put that way. And that made me a believer in the system. And so I include it among the things that I teach because I think it's very important. Um, when you work with healing in particular, all of these little chakras can be very important to work with. All of these different aspects and levels and companions of chakras, um, or whatever you want to call them, they can be very important because you are dealing with particular parts of the body, you're dealing with particular areas, and knowing what's going on there, knowing what their energetic purposes, their energetic inclinations are, helps with that considerably. In daily practice, if you're not focused on um, that particular modality, it's much less important. So for most people, they don't need to know about the minor chakras, but the major ones are very important. And I said I was going to go into the history of chakras a little bit as well. And so I'm going to do that now. And the term chakra is out of Sanskrit, it means circle. And lots of people will tell you that the concept of chakras is a Hindu concept. And it certainly is a concept in Hinduism. And under the term chakra, um, it's fair to make that statement. However, there were several other cultures that had teachings about chakras under different terms, and we'll come back to those in a moment. But chakras under that term show up in Hinduism, but they also show up in Jainism. And I will point out to you that um, as little as maybe 60 years ago, people didn't actually, Western people didn't make a differentiation between Hinduism and Jainism, which is now very important. And they are thought of as separate movements. But they both teach about chakras, just as they both teach about karma. And what they teach is not the same. They both have their own take on both of these concepts. Buddhism makes extensive use of chakras as well, and under that term of chakra. And all of these um, have somewhat different teachings, somewhat different ways of interacting with these energy centers. In addition to that, several other cultures have worked with chakras. And for example, the Celtic peoples had a system of chakras, but they didn't call them chakras, they called them cauldrons. Um, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but kore. Um, and they only recognized three of them, one in the abdomen, one at the heart, and one at the crown. And this is kind of an important point, and it is worth noting in terms of where this idea originates that both the Celtic peoples and um, at least part of what makes the Indian peoples were united in Indo European ancestry. And it may go back much farther than is normally given credit for. But the Celts had that system. The Chinese in Taoism have a similar system where the chakras where the energy centers are called cauldrons, dantian. And they also have three of them, again, in the abdomen, in the heart, and in the head. Um, it's also worth saying that even within Hinduism, the number of chakras varies considerably. But seven is the preeminent number that you'll find. But for example, if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, they have three of them, and they call them marmas. Um, in Vaishnavism, there are 12 of them. In Shaivism, there are only five, and so forth through many variations. Another one that's very important to mention is the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks wrote about chakras. Plato wrote about chakras. And the Greeks worked with seven of them. Were probably influenced by the Hindu people because they certainly had a connection with them, or by Jainist people. And they had the seven chakras, and going from top to bottom, they were the Hieron Osteon, the Gonades, the Gaster, the Phrines, uh, the Traxios, the Encephalos, and the Korophs. Korophis, I beg your pardon. Um, and how broadly used that system was, we have no way to know because we really don't have that much literature from ancient Greece. We have only a tiny percentage of it. So, I mentioned Plato wrote about the chakras, and they show up in a couple of places, but not very much. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a vast system of literature about them that simply hasn't survived. Um, and hello to Christine in the chat room. And Christine says, yes, so important to learn and practice because so within, so without. Absolutely. And one of the things that I have learned over the years is that there's always more to learn. And this is one of the reasons that in talking about the history of chakras, I want to talk about all the different people who've had different teachings on this subject. Um, and in our Correllian second degree material, we talk about this at some detail. And again, we have the Greeks with their teachings, we have the Celts with their teachings, we have Taoism with its teaching, we have Hinduism with its teaching, and a variety of different terms were used, but they're all energy centers. And I know there's some people who want to keep the peas separate from the carrots and don't like using the term chakra. Um, but personally, it seems to me to be a perfectly sensible word to be using. Um, I think that I'm a great believer in broad definitions because I found that they generally work pretty well. I'm not a great believer in focusing on the differences because each of these different systems is different from the others, including our modern Western system. Things that we teach about the chakras are very different from, for example, what you might find in any of those different Hindu teachings I just mentioned, or Jainist teachings, or Buddhist or Taoist teachings, um, or ancient Celtic teachings, because we have our own experiences and we've learned our own things that um, are particular to our background, our needs, and our experiences. And going back to what I was saying about how the body, whether we're talking about the energetic body or the physical body, does not necessarily match um, the maps that people make of it. Um, everything in the end is individual. We are individual, our experiences are individual, and I think we must remember that. And so, if in some cases our teachings are unique to our background, it may be because our experiences are unique to our background, and that doesn't make anyone else wrong. Um, but being different from um, this group or that group doesn't make anyone wrong either. There are many ways of seeing things. This is why I'm so fond of the diamond metaphor for spirituality, for deity. One stone with many facets. And I think this is true for almost anything in life. And they've done experiments where they arrange to have something happen with a number of people watching it, and then talk to those people about what they said, or about what they saw, and what they say often is not the same story, because even though they all saw the same incident, they didn't all perceive it the same way. And I think this is one of the great truths of life that many spiritual systems overlook: the idiosyncrasy of our experiences, and how we learn from them, how we grow from them. And if I had $1 for everyone I have seen insist that anyone who differs from them in teachings is wrong, I'd have a lot of dollars, but that wouldn't make them right. It just means there are different ways of looking at things. And I am very much aware that if someone has a different point of view than mine, that doesn't make either of us right or wrong. It means we've had different perceptions and experiences. And I will use the one that has worked for me, the one that corresponds to my understanding. And I know there are people out there who get very upset with that idea because they want everything spelled out for them in black and white. But I have to tell you, spelling everything out in black and white is not advanced teaching. It's highly simplified, um, and not very precise when you really come down to it, because those charts don't really match reality. Reality is far more flexible and far more individual than what a lot of people want to make it. That's true for, again, our chakras, our energetic body, even our physical body. And, two people can approach the same situation in very different ways and both be successful. And this, I think, is one of the main things that I would say to people. Now, I was also going to talk a little bit about the idea that just as when we talk about the vortices of the earth, some are natural and some are created through use. I believe this is true also when talking about our physical energetic system. When we talk about artificial vortices being created through use, they're created from the energy that's already there and the energy that people bring to augment that. Energy is everywhere. Everything is energy. It's true in our bodies also. And where we focus, um, our activities will cause different sorts of development in our energetic system. And hello to Vidi Laka uh, in the chat room. It's good to see you, Vidi. Um, and this is true just in everyday life. Because we don't all have the same experiences, we don't all develop the same way. And Vidi says, this is an interesting topic. Yes, I think you'll find it's a very interesting topic, one that I can only scratch on in half an hour. We could go on about this indefinitely and never really cover it. Not all of it, because there's just so much. You could write book after book. And if you go out and look for books on chakras and the body's energy system, you'll find hundreds of them. And they run the gamut from very sensible to absolute nonsense, like all subjects. And how do you tell the difference? Well, you tell you te- you compare what you're reading to what you're experiencing, and to what you learn through study and dealing with other people. And for me, one of the main things I have learned is that not everyone's going to have the same experiences. And again, that doesn't make one right and the other wrong. It means they've approached it differently and come away from it differently. Now, you can augment chakras. And we talk about this, I believe, in third degree, with energetic engines, which are meant to stimulate development or um, perhaps correct deficiencies, or add to, in general, the energy that's being processed through that chakra. And in my experience, these are generally based on forms of geometric magic. We don't talk about them a great deal because unless you really know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But it is something that can be done and that advanced practitioners can and do, augmenting their chakras with energetic engines. And if you do this, it will be reincarnated with you in different different lifetimes in many cases, because you've put it into your continuing energetic existence. Therefore, when you do energetic healing, you'll sometimes find old energetic augmentations that need to either be cleaned and repaired or removed. Um, and sometimes that's something you want to do. I've read about people who totally misinterpret this and think it's put in by nefarious forces, but actually it's an advanced metaphysical technique. Even the creation of what we might call artificial chakras to aid with certain parts of our physicality or our energetic nature is completely possible, done in the same way as an energetic engine and placed into the energetic body. Again, I don't recommend that unless you're highly advanced with energetic working. But if you are, again, it tends to rely heavily on geometric magic, at least in my background. And um, I have found in working with it that a lot, a lot of it, in my experience, will come to you as you're doing it in understanding how things fit together. One of the things we write about in, I believe, third degree is the idea of interacting with the universe as a grid or as a machine or in various other images to help you to see it as a as a unified system. And hello to Amanda in the chat room. Amanda says, greetings. What is happening with the chakras when a person astral projects? And so I believe there are a couple of different answers to that. One, they're keeping the body running. Um, a certain portion of the chakras just does that. But other parts are part of the energetic system that's wherever your consciousness is. And this comes back to all those layers in the chakras, that it's not so straightforward, that it's just one thing. So I would say that they're active both in the body itself, which is why the body is still going, but also in the projection itself. And even within higher levels of the being, this is why when you reincarnate, certain aspects of that energetic system go forward with you. Um, and so I would say that part of it is in the astral. In fact, in a manner of speaking, it's all in the astral. Um, but it's very important to the running of the physical. So, in terms of what happens with them, it's wherever you are, including if you're in more than one place. If you are bilocating, which is a whole other subject, they'll be working in both places where you are. If you're astral traveling, which is a kind of bilocation, um, and we have 2 minutes. We're not going into that subject of bilocation, but the chakras are working in both places of consciousness, both places of existence. And this again comes back to the fact they're actually very complex. We think of them as these simple energetic circles, but that's not really what they are. They're a far more complex engine than that. And Amanda says, thank you. Thank you, Amanda. With that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. This is not even remotely an exhaustive conversation about chakras, but it is a good introduction to them and a good companion to having talked about the vortices of the earth. And when we talk about the crystal web, when we talk about energy work, both of which we'll be talking about more as we go forward, because energy work has always been one of my specialties. And if you have read my writings, you are already inundated with energy work. Um, but understanding these things is very important to understanding that. So with that, I want to thank you for joining me. Tomorrow will be our weekly roundup when we'll talk about interesting stories, hopefully. There certainly have been a couple. We'll probably be talking about the eclipse as part of it and things that did and did not happen during the eclipse. And I hope you'll join me for that. And now let us close with our prayer as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to continue to be with us and guide us as we go forward. We rejoice in your presence in our lives and this wonderful and complex world you have given us. Help us to remain flexible in our mindset, to understand that every situation has more than one side, and every aspect of existence may have more than one way of looking at it, certainly more than one dimension to its being. Help us to be able to understand and appreciate the complexity of existence. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and respect. And from respect, knowing you are always with us still, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always, and I'll see you tomorrow.